everyone. Welcome to episode 11 of 360 Anything Goes, right here on Spreaker, YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, iHeartRadio, some places I don't even know about. You can find 360 Wrestling Podcasts. And Lance Brock here. Thank you everyone for tuning in. And this week, I've done this once before. Done something a little different here on Anything Goes. I believe it was episode 5. Was just kind of like I called it, an Anything Goes episode of Anything Goes. And that's what it is here this week on episode 11. And just going to talk about anything that's on my mind right now. I'm just going to talk and not even plan anything out, not even think ahead of anything. Just go ahead and talk right here on this episode of 360 Anything Goes. Could just be 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 5 hours. Well, it's not going to be that long, but just how long ever I feel like talking for on this episode, that's how long it will be. And first, Anything Goes. So far I've enjoyed doing, and I thought this might be kind of like some of the things I've tried before, where I do it a little bit, do it for 1 or 2 episodes, and then eventually I just stop doing it. I just quit, give up. But so far, 11 episodes, doing pretty well so far. I don't see it ending anytime soon as of right now. And definitely have a lot of things planned that I would like to talk about in the future, whether from TV shows to movies to a lot of things, a lot of topics that I would like to talk about right here on Anything Goes that I haven't got to yet. And so far on Anything Goes, I've talked about Young Rock. I've talked about the Three Stooges and what was the second episode? I know the first one was Young Rock. I don't know why, but for some reason, I cannot remember what episode 2 was. Again, not sure why, but let me look it up here. Hopefully it will not take too long. I apologize. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm curious to what I did talk about on episode 2. And episode 2, oh, that's right, the Full House episode that I talked about so far. The Beach Boy one, Beach Boy Bingo. I forgot about that. Don't know how I could forget about that. One of my favorite Full House episodes. And that was episode 2. And then episode 3, of course, Rio Bravo, one of my favorite all-time movies with John Wayne, Dean Martin, Ricky Nelson, Walter Brennan, and I enjoyed that one quite a bit. Episode 4 was game shows. At the time, I was thinking about doing it, but the reason I decided to for that week was because unfortunately the passing of Bob Barker. So I thought that would be the time to talk about game shows here on Anything Goes. And that episode was dedicated to the memory of Bob Barker. And then we'll go on to episode 5, which is the first Anything Goes episode of Anything Goes, which that's quite a mouthful. And episode 6, which was the Three Stooges, India's Deluxe with Curly. That was the first Three Stooges short I talked about here on Anything Goes. And episode 7 was, see here, soaps. The soaps episode talked about all the soaps that I have watched, all the ones I like and follow. Then episode 8 was all about, once again, the Three Stooges, but on this episode talking all about Shemp, which was the last episode of September, or as I call it, Shemp-tember. It talked about some of my favorite Three Stooges shorts featuring Shemp. And episode 9, Chucky the series, which talked about the first 2 seasons. And probably will be mentioning Chucky in just a little bit. Season 3. When I'm recording this now, I just actually finished watching episode 3 of season 3 of Chucky the series. I'll talk about that in just a little bit. Won't get too much into it, but I'll talk a little bit about it. And then episode 10, just last week, was the Simpsons first Simpsons episode I've done on here, The Old Man and the Lisa, featuring WWE Hall of Famer Bret the Hitman Hart. And I have wanted to talk about the Simpsons here on Anything Goes, and the reason I chose that episode was because of Bret Hart. And Friday, if you have heard 360 Wrestling Fanatic, went to the Heart of the Matter show here in Wayne, Michigan, a special benefit show to help kids with autism, and Bret Hart was there and did a meet and greet before the show and kicked off the show with a in-ring promo talking about autism and wrestling in Michigan, about how much he likes coming here. Very good show, and I definitely recommend, if you missed it, listening to that episode of 360 Wrestling Fanatic. And had a special guest co-host, even my good buddy Mickey, who went to the show with me. We came on after, did the podcast. So I definitely recommend checking that out and listening to that if you have a chance. And now, to get into this week's episode of Anything Goes, the Anything Goes episode, which I might do more in the future every once in a while. I'm not really sure how often I'm going to do this, but maybe a week if I'm really not sure what to talk about or anything like that. I might just do Anything Goes episode of Anything Goes and just talk about anything, what pops up in my head. And hate to start off this episode with sad news. And over the weekend, I think it was Sunday, I believe, was the passing of Suzanne Summers. And definitely a great actress. And I first saw Suzanne Summers when I was a kid. Of course, I watched reruns of Three's Company, and always enjoyed Three's Company. I'm not saying that I'm a really huge fan of it or it's one of my favorite shows, but I watched it, and definitely a fan of it. I don't know, I'm not saying I'm the biggest fan, but I did enjoy watching it. And Mr. Roper, Don Knotts as Mr. Furley. And also, when I was younger, Step by Step, of course, on ABC with Patrick Duffy. And I loved Step by Step. I watched it on TGIF on Friday nights after Boy Meets World, I believe it was on. And I even used to, after it was off the air, I remember they showed reruns on ABC Family, which is no longer around, but they showed reruns of that. And lately, right now in 2023, I haven't got around to it yet, but on Max, Step by Step is there. I even added it to my watch list on Max, but I have not gotten around to watching any of the episodes yet. I hope to soon go on there and watch episodes of Step by Step, which, like I said, great show. I thought Sasha Mitchell, who played Cody, was really good on there, and you have JT, and I remember a little while back, actually, on the podcast Pod Meets World with Daniel Fishel, Ryder Strong, and Ro Friedle from Boy Meets World. I can't think of her name right now, but they had the one who played Al Lambert on from Step by Step, which is a good episode, and that is a good podcast too that I recommend, Pod Meets World. That's one of the few non-wrestling podcasts that I actually listen to, and that's how you know that it must be a pretty good podcast if it's a non-wrestling podcast that I listen to, because there's so many wrestling podcasts on the internet right now today. So if I want to listen to anything that's not wrestling, it's got to be good. Or at least in my opinion anyway, who knows. But also in the news, as I mentioned a little bit ago, Chucky, I don't want to give too much away if anyone. Spoiler alert, I am recording this on a Wednesday night, so I just watched it a couple hours ago, right after AEW Dynamite. I went right to the Sling DVR, fired up this episode of Chucky, and it's the third episode of season 3. And so far, definitely not disappointed with this season. I thought it has been great so far. And even though it is early on, I might say this might be the best season of the series so far. First season and second season were very good, but season 3 so far, just 3 episodes in, has been great. And definitely graphic with some of the kills that have been in this season. Yeah, gunshots. You have someone's throat being cut and her head kind of hanging from a thread. And the foster mother of Jake and Devin and Lexi having the American flag held over her head, suffocated or something. And then tonight, I don't want to give too much away in case anybody hasn't seen the episode yet, but it guest stars Kenan Thompson, of course, from Kenan and Kel, All That, Good Burger. Big fan of Kenan Thompson. Plays a cab driver driving Chucky and Caroline, and he is not in the episode very long. Let me just say that. Again, spoiler alert if you don't want to hear it. If you haven't seen this episode yet, if you're a big Chucky fan like I am, don't skip ahead a little bit. But Chucky kills Kenan Thompson, shoving an umbrella in his mouth, and then once it is in his mouth and his throat, he opens it, and his throat just explodes. Poor Kenan Thompson. And definitely not very long, like I said. And great actor. I know he's even on, Saturday Night Live, or at least he was at one time. I don't know if he still is or not. Also was in the Fat Albert movie. And I even heard on Paramount Plus sometime, I don't think it's been out yet, but I heard about a Good Burger 2, which I have to admit, for that, I might consider getting Paramount Plus at least for 1 month anyway, just to watch that, and then that's it. And I was definitely a Good Burger fan when I was a kid. I watched all that, was a big fan of Kenan and Kel, and Good Burger, the movie, was also a big fan of. And also, not too long ago, if you listen to the podcasts and everything regularly, you know that I'm a big fan of Wheel of Fortune. And not too long ago, Kenan Mitchell was one of the celebrities on Celebrity Wheel of Fortune. And unfortunately, Celebrity Wheel of Fortune, the season airs on Wednesday while AEW Dynamite is on. And that is one bad thing about Sling. They do not have ABC, so unfortunately cannot use my Sling DVR to record Wheel of Fortune. And you know me, as much as I love Celebrity, or as much as I love Wheel of Fortune, I should say, pro wrestling always comes first. And so looking forward to seeing Good Burger 2. And while I have Paramount Plus, if I do for a month, which I have before a couple times actually, and I'm going to say it's bad, but I'd say it's probably my least favorite streaming out of all the ones I have. Peacock, I need of course, for WWE, also Days of Our Lives, Chucky, the first couple of seasons are on Peacock now as well. And I think this season, this new one might be airing on Peacock. And I have Max because it's included on my Cricket wireless plan. So that is why I have Max. And hopefully, soon we'll have AEW on Max. I'm hoping anyway. And also, of course, there's Honor Club, which gotta have that. And that is about all the streaming I think I have right now. But like I said, if I do get Paramount Plus, will probably only be for 1 month. I mean, I admit some of those South Park exclusive Paramount Plus specials are good, which I believe will eventually be also be on Max at some point. Not sure, but also the new Beavis and Butthead series that's back, and I know at one point they did show it on Comedy Central one of the seasons, but I don't know if they're gonna show that again. And I don't know about anyone else, but the new Beavis and Butthead I thought was pretty funny, actually. So if I do have Paramount Plus for a month, I'll definitely be checking that out. And that is about enough of the streaming. And talk about a movie, but which also is a pro wrestling movie. I saw the other day the trailer for the Von Erichs movie, Iron Claw, which is coming out in December, I believe. My first reaction to it, I thought it looks pretty good, actually. And if I have a chance to, I would like to go to a theater and see it. And hopefully it will be playing here. I think it's nationwide, or at least I think so anyway. But definitely looks very good. Zac Efron playing, is it Kevin Von Erich he's playing? MJF in it, and other wrestlers are in this as well. But it does look very good, I think. But who knows? We'll just have to wait and see till it comes out. And real quick, some podcasts. Talked about The Simpsons. I listened to The Simpsons Show, which is a very good one. The 138 Simpsons Spectacular. And Chucky, which I have talked about. Chucky Vision, which is a very good podcast. And I definitely recommend checking that one out. And also How Rude Tanneritos, hosted by Jodie Sweden and Andrea Barber, a Full House podcast, which they talk about each episode in order. Very good podcast. And talking about the non-wrestling ones I listen to, I mentioned Pod Meets World earlier. And that is about it for non-wrestling podcasts I listen to. The rest of the podcasts I listen to, of course, pro wrestling. And there are definitely a lot of good ones, even if they're not pro wrestling. And in the future, here on 360, Anything Goes, might talk more about some of the podcasts I listen to. And just like I said, anything goes. Next week, I'm not even sure which what I'm going to talk about just yet. So, like they say, just going to call it in the ring, and just whatever I want to talk about next week, that's what I'll talk about. And eventually, I know some things I would like to talk about on future episodes eventually, but not quite sure when I'm going to get to them yet. But actually, I probably should hurry up and talk about some Halloween episodes of TV shows that I would like to, since Halloween is just around the corner. And I need to get to watching them on Max, for example. Family Matters, the 2 Steve-O episodes that were on. The first one with Steve Urkel's dummy of himself that comes to life and tries to take his soul. And then in the second one, part 2, Steve-O is back, and this time he's not alone. Carl dummy as well. Carl's bad, which I need to watch those on Max, and maybe sometime here in the next couple weeks on Anything Goes, I'll talk about them, and maybe just Halloween episodes of TV shows that I like in general. Maybe The Simpsons, Treehouse of Horrors, and different Halloween episodes, things like that. Maybe some scary movies too. And before I go, I just want to talk about one thing I forgot to mention. I don't know if I could talk about this long enough for a whole episode, but one thing I do want to mention, and I just watched this the other day, and it is Abbott and Costello. Who's on first? I just want to say that is one of the funniest things I have ever seen, I have ever heard. And maybe one day I'll talk more about Abbott and Costello, maybe the TV show, some of the movies. But I just wanted to definitely talk a little bit about it here on this episode. Who's on first? All I gotta say is, if you have not seen Who's on First, definitely check it out. Abbott and Costello, are one of the most funniest comedy duos ever. And Who's on First is one of the most funniest things there are. I'd say Abbott and Costello, and then maybe even funnier is the Three Stooges. I'd say, but like I said, maybe some movies or the TV show, things like that, I might talk about Abbott and Costello on a future episode of Anything Goes. And that is all for episode 11 of 360 Anything Goes. Thank you everyone for listening. And next week, like I said, not quite sure just yet which one I'm going to talk about, or what I'm going to talk about, I should say. Hope everyone has a great week. And stay tuned to 360 Wrestling Podcasts right here on Spreaker, YouTube, or wherever you listen. Coming up this Saturday night, we have Impact Wrestling Bound for Glory, AEW Saturday Collision, AEW Battle of the Belts. Going to try to have a live episode this Saturday night, so be right here for 360 Wrestling Fanatic. And every morning, 360 Good Morning Wrestling fans. And I will be back next week to talk about something. Not sure what just yet. Remember, if you want to suggest an episode of Anything Goes, something you want me to talk about, whether if it's a favorite movie of yours, a favorite TV show of yours, or just anything you think I should talk about here on Anything Goes, 360 Wrestling Podcast at gmail.com, or You can tweet me, X me, whatever it's called now, at 360 Wrestling Pod. If there's anything you want me to talk about. So, that's all for this episode, everyone. I appreciate everyone listening. It means a lot. And once again, we'll talk to everyone next week on 360 Anything Goes. But until then, see you later, alligator.